1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm very excited about today's program. The reason being the gentleman you see, assuming you're watching, I know some of you aren't, sitting beside me. He is Professor Jared Day of CMU, the History Department, and also has some other positions, and we'll talk about that a bit later, the Forum for Economic Development, and he's a busy guy, writing, blogging, and that's, if any of you, and I know a lot of you do, subscribe to Daylee News Nuggets, this is the guy. This is the guy who puts it together. It's been going now for, I mean, you're on your like...
It started in 2008.
So it's like...
Yeah.
We're into the thousands.
Yeah, I think we just hit 1,325.
And for those who have never checked it out, I mean, please, it's so easy to get onto, right?
Yes.
You explain how you get onto it.
If you just Google Daylee News Nuggets with a Daylee as the spelling of daily, just Google that. It's the first thing that comes up.
That's right. And then bang, you're in.
That's it.
And then, well, they have to sign up so that you can send them. He'll send it to your email whenever he gets one out there.
Yes.
Sometimes they come almost every day.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a little bit of a.
Usually, for a number of years, it was every day, and you know, due to my time constraints, my goal these days is to do it 5 days a week, like during the week, and take the weekend to do other things.
Well, I have to tell you, I mean, it is a compilation of things that have been written, I guess, in the last 24 hours or since he did it last. And he puts it out there, sometimes with commentary. He also gives you an opportunity to link to a million other wonderful sources. How do you, I mean, I think I read a lot so that I can, you know, babble on issues.
Yeah.
I mean, because often you send this out to me at an early hour in the morning. What, have you been up since 2 a.m.? I don't understand. How?
Well, in many ways, it's like I feel like I'm kind of somebody with a suit of Velcro during the day. That you know, during the day when I go online, I'll get one or two items.
Yeah.
And I go online maybe 5 or 6 times a day. And so, with each of those times that I go on, I will pick up one or two more things, such that by the end of the day, I'll have enough for, you know, a posting of, say, between 10 and 20 items.
And you obviously go looking in certain sources that you find generally are going to give you the better stuff. Which are? I mean, where do you always look? What do you always read?
The Daily Beast. And that's it's linked with Newsweek basically, but they make a point of coming out with 8 or 10 really concise commentaries about just about every day. The Atlantic, New York Times, and Washington Post, of course, and also sites like Talking Points Memo. And while Talking Points Memo has a certain slant to it, as do some of the other sites that I look to, that it becomes a way of getting what is like the news that's evolving during the day. Because the problem with a newspaper these days is often the case that what you get is 10 or 12 hours old.
It's dated. I mean, it's amazing, but yes, it's dated. Wow, that's so 10 hours ago.
Yes.
And so this 24/7 cycle really keeps you on your toes.
It does, but I think it also ties back in with what had actually had me start the blog in the first place.
Aha! How did you know that was my question?
Well,
what got into you?
I used to phone in a number of years, over the years, and you knew that I'm a big fan of Barack Obama, and I had identified him as somebody as late as, I think it was late 2006, as somebody that he was going to run in 2007, 2008, and that he was going to win. Okay, he was going to beat Hillary Clinton. And
Too bad you didn't put a lot of money on that.
I didn't do that. I didn't think to do that. But I could have bet on it, and I knew that his presidency would be historic in so many ways. And so the blog became, in many ways, a way for me to kind of experience that historicity and that sense that, this is going to be one of those key turning points.
Yes, but I'm sure when you thought that, you weren't thinking of some of what, in fact, has occurred.
No. No.
Yes, historically is a very interesting presidency.
Yes.
But,
yes.
I mean, the total breakdown of government and its ability to function has been, to me, the biggest story of this. Not?
I would say it's the biggest political story.
Okay.
I would say that there is a larger, both a policy story that's going on, like with this implementation of the health care, of Obamacare, and also just the broader change in the party alignment and what it's going to be for the future.
Okay, so my sense is you're one of those folks like me who is thinking that we could be watching the demise of the Republican Party, do you think?
I think in its current configuration, and now this is one of those areas as a historian, I'm of two minds on it, in the sense that historians, the safest bet is always that no change.
It will prevail.
Yeah, no change.
Somehow it prevails. I know that is the safest bet.
Yeah,
but it wasn't the safest bet that back in 2007, Barack Obama was going to be the president of the United States.
So I feel like my long shots have come in some abundance, but and so the other safe bet. It's not as safe as the first one, but it is a safe bet nonetheless, is that what we're looking at is a minor blip, and that things will quickly fall back into some routine, identifiable partisan pattern. And my own view is that that's not what's happening either. I'm taking a much
middle
more
of the road.
No.
Sure.
I'm actually taking much more of a long shot kind of bet as to what's happening.
Okay, so what's going to happen to the Republican? It's going to split.
I think it is right before our eyes. That's what's happening.
Seems to be.
Yeah, and this parties have splits sometimes.
So is Ted Cruz going to be the leader of a new party?
I doubt it. I actually think that he's as likely a winner of the nomination in 2016 as anybody else for the Republican Party.
No, Rand Paul would be better than him.
I'm skeptical. I think that the religious conservatives have no stomach for Rand Paul. And they exercise such an important constituency, especially in the early primary states, that, like Iowa, I would be surprised. The other thing about Rand Paul is that he has there's kind of racist undertones to some of his rhetoric and some of the people around him that,
as did his dad.
Exactly. So I actually, and I also think that the libertarian perspective that he represents, there is like 30% in the Republican Party that represent that, and it doesn't go much further.
But it picks up independents.
That is true. But you see, independents aren't going to win the nomination for whoever runs in 2016. You look at the rest of them. But anyway, getting back to your original question about, is the Republican Party splitting apart? I think they're doing so in a historic kind of a way. And when I say that, here again, I'm kind of going out on a limb with this, but I'm prepared to defend it, that there's moments in American history, and there's only been 4 or 5, where you see one party really go through a meltdown. And here we would have.
When was the last one?
The last one would have been in the 1930s when the Republican Party. Again. Yes, and that would have been the kind of William Howard Taft, Harding, Coolidge Republicans of the 20s and earlier. That party, and people forget that the Republicans were in the wilderness for 20 years. From 1932 to 1952.
And when they reemerged with Dwight David Eisenhower. No?
Well, in part, but also with Joe McCarthy.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
How we
but if you go even before that time period, you're really only looking at maybe 2 other moments in U.S. history. And then one could quibble about 1 or 2 other things in the 19th century, but you're looking at the 1850s when the Democratic Party fell apart, and you're looking at the 18 teens when the Federalist Party.
Okay, well, most of us, of course, know nothing about any of that, but you're a historian,
right.
So you're seeing this as
in that context,
extremely unusual thing is happening.
That I actually look at the Republican Party now is that they're on the cusp of going through one of those kind of meltdowns.
Now, fine and dandy for them. What does that do to the country when that happens?
Well, what it happens, you got to look at what precedes it. Is what you get before it is profound gridlock.
Okay, I think we know. Okay, go no further.
We know what that looks like.
Okay, we got that.
Yeah, but what happens after that is you have profound change. So, like after the Democratic Party falls apart, now it's like, of course, we had the Civil War, but then what you had is Reconstruction, and you had years where the Democratic Party was in the wilderness at the time. They really would not even begin to get back into the saddle until the 1890s. Mm-hmm. And even then, between 1868 and 1932, there's only 2 Democratic presidents.
Wilson and
Grover Cleveland. And Grover Cleveland is indistinguishable from the Republicans that are around him.
I was going to say, actually, I thought for a minute, no, he's a Republican. No, but he's the only Democrat that could get elected.
That's it. And even then, Woodrow Wilson, the only reason Woodrow Wilson won in 1912 is because Teddy Roosevelt and Taft split.
That's right.
The vote.
That's right.
So my view is that, and this is, I think that the pace of this is actually accelerating, that we're seeing this meltdown happen with the Republicans. People had all kinds of projections about how this shutdown was going to go. And
You called that one, right?
I did call that one.
Yeah, right.
That
it was all going to come down on their heads.
They were going to lose it completely,
right.
And they did, and that it was going to lead to kind of a fratricidal intra-party conflict. And they're just gearing up.
Yeah,
they're just gearing up for that right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, your Daylee News Nuggets, though, is, and you're quite clear at the top that it is a progressive compilation of.
It doesn't claim to be nonpartisan.
Okay, but so are you concerned that you are part of this problem we do have in this country of not venturing over to taste of whatever the other side is supping on? You know, that there's this total. So that when I read Daylee News Nuggets, you're feeding me stuff I like. You know what I mean? And when you do give me something from National Review or something else, it's some crazed conservative having seen the light or beating up on his own.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it more helpful if we, I don't know, you know what I'm saying, because there's a lot of talk that we can't be a country again unless we start at least talking the same language.
I think of it in a somewhat different way, and that is that I view most of what's out there in the media now as misleading.
Oh,
okay. And when you get over into the conservative media side, I've become much more skeptical about even the voices of reason. I mean, for myself, there are certain pundits that I really like on the right side.
Didn't you used to think George Will was a person of reason?
To an extent.
But he's gone over the edge, too.
He's lost several wheels on his wagon. I have a theory about this. But, when I like David Frum. I like Ross Douthat. I like David Brooks. And I like Kathleen Parker. These are people that...
Well, they're reasonable.
Yes. But the thing about them is that they expose themselves enough to what's outside the right-wing media bubble.
Right.
And when I look at a lot of the commentary, I think it's one of the things that one of the biggest pitfalls is that on the right, you can see it to some extent on the left also, but there's a lot on the left that I never consult at all as a result of the bubble that's on the left.
Oh, tell us. No, stop. Let me get a digression here.
Yes.
Name some names here.
Joe Conason. Well, even though I do post Joe Conason on occasion, that I view his analysis.
Just gone over.
Paul Begala. What's his name? Carville. James Carville.
Yeah. Raging Cajun.
Yes, and there's a whole...
because those are political operatives.
But here's the thing. That's the key dimension there, is that for so many people on the left media and the even bigger group on the right, they view a part of their role as to be political operatives.
And it's a game to them. It's a game.
I know.
That's how Carville can sleep in the same bed with that.
I know.
Mary Madeline. Just a game, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. So, and that actually makes. So I actually view like almost everything I see on television. You almost never see me cite things from television, simply because the dynamics in play are really about political operatives. People making, what do I want to say? They're kind of becoming a certain kind of television pundit that
it's like worldwide wrestling. It's like
it's theater.
It's theater. It's entertainment. It is so clearly that.
Yes. And whereas for me, I one of the things I work on with my blog is getting people who have something distinct or unique to say.
Okay.
And sometimes that it's more on the left than on the right, but I try to be as inclusive as possible.
Now, Andrew Sullivan is an interesting character.
Isn't he, though? I think he's amazing.
And he still calls himself, the other day he referred to himself, he said, my party, and he meant the Republicans.
Exactly.
Oh, come on. Hasn't he left? serious.
I think he hasn't voted Republican in years, but I think that he is a Republican. He is a what is it? An Edmund Burke conservative, which is to say, he goes back to the original idea of what it meant to be conservative, which is basically that you allow things to grow, progress, and change, but in a very limited way. Whereas the climate we live in now is reactionary. It's actually governed by people whose, depending on who you're talking to, it's like even, most conservatives, it's like the golden age was Dwight Eisenhower's.
Oh, I think that, if you keep talking to him, you end up back in
the 1920s.
No, you go further. You end up in, before
Abraham
the Enlightenment.
Lincoln.
You go before the Enlightenment. You have to get back there into the 1600s.
Yep.
I mean,
You've seen some of these on the conservative sites like townhall.com or redstate.com that they're excoriating Teddy Roosevelt.
They would.
They're excoriating Abraham Lincoln.
They would, and we all, yes, we all know that Richard Nixon, his domestic policies now would put him to the left of Barack Obama.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
And your head spins when you realize that statement, however absurd it sounds, is true.
Yeah. I mean, Nixon was the first person. He got through the Environmental Protection Agency, the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Clean Air Act.
Unbelievable.
And one of them that most people don't know about, the National Environmental Policy Act, which basically requires environmental impact studies.
Oh, that was a Republican mandate?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
And I was a grown-up then. That is how. I mean, I know I'm.
And it was Nixon also who he was prepared to sign on to legislation for national health care.
Correct. Absolutely.
And Ted Kennedy shot it down. Something he did. I understand that he regretted for the rest of his life, but that's what he did. He thought that, given in the light of Watergate and other things that were happening, that the Democrats could do better the next time around, and they never got it the next time around.
Well, as a historian, what do you think the Republicans think that they know their? I mean, so they have eschewed their own history, their own. Do they think they have? Where do they think they're going? Where do these idiots think they're heading? What is their?
Well, you have to understand, this, at least from my point of view, the foundation, some of their starting points, and one of them being that since before Barry Goldwater, what you've seen with the Republicans, and I would actually say more with conservatives, the emergence of the modern conservative movement is an effort to. They deliberately target what we would think of as established sources of authority, such as universities, the news media, economists, since 1990, scientists.
Okay, to target them and take them down so that they see. But I think yes, they have done that, and they've done it well.
Yes, they have.
And what they've done is they've taken all these institutional pillars and been kicking them at
such that now
there's no the people have nowhere they look and trust.
Exactly.
Or what would be the purpose of that kind of a
doing that?
Yes.
Well,
what is that about? Except I mean, destruction. I don't understand.
Well,
what are they building by pulling all that down?
I would say it's more they're trying to resurrect something, in the sense of trying to resurrect a mythic past.
Oh, dear God in heaven.
One that, if you're close...
Each man for himself?
Sort of. But it's also one where people were more self-reliant, where government wasn't as big as it is, but even more than that, there's the cultural dimensions to it are important to keep in mind. That we really, when I mentioned Dwight Eisenhower, well, Brown v. Board of Ed came along in the first year, the first 2 years of
his
presidency, and since then, I think that there is a sense of cultural assault that conservatives have felt, and that they look for reasons to resurrect it, and thus you don't want to be arguing with like artists or historians or economists or people like that about whether did his New Deal program actually work or not?
Right.
I mean, this is still, even to this day, ground zero for economists.
Really, there's not agreement.
How you view that the 1930s will almost always determine how you think about 2008, 2009.
I think this wistfulness for a mythological past is so patently dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I've always been talking about feeling like I've fallen down, the rabbit hole. Well, of course I feel like I've fallen down the rabbit hole if we have a major party that didn't fall down it. They bought a ticket to it, a one-way ticket.
Yep, and they're making that hole bigger or deeper.
It's so odd. What are they? You can only get to a position like that because of fear.
Yes.
So,
but here's the other piece. One of the consequences of delegitimating all those institutions of authority is the fact that it's created the space for a whole bunch of other actors and voices to come out and basically assert things in which there's almost nobody around to push back that has the legitimacy to push back. So what you see, for example, is that for a lot of conservatives right now, that is the sense they have an almost fear of an existential threat to the United States that is represented by Barack Obama, the liberals,
the gays,
the immigrants. Economists of a certain stripe, that there's a sense of the world their world being under assault. And this has created a tremendous problem for these two factions that are emerging right now. Because, think about it for yourself. If you thought the United States was facing an existential threat, you'd do anything.
I'd go get my gun.
Exactly.
I'd go get my gun.
And so what you have is a faction of the GOP who genuinely believes that.
They do believe it.
And then you have another faction who kind of known all along that was BS, but that they were happy to let it ride for the sake of staying back in power.
They made a deal with the devil.
Exactly. Now
it's destroying their party.
Exactly. They created a monster, and the monster is eating them right now.
Well, a classic of the most recent iteration of that, it seems, is McCain choosing Sarah Palin.
Yes, exactly.
There it is.
And the degree to which Mitch McConnell has had this love-hate relationship with Rand Paul, and that John Cornyn has had the relationship with Ted Cruz in Texas, and you see Mitch McConnell's relationship with Ted Cruz. It really represents these two dynamics where the one is you have leaders that know that so much of what's been said over the last 10, 20 years, dating back to before Clinton, it was kind of bullshit. And now the thing is, they convinced millions of Americans that it's true.
Well, it seems to me the damage they've done is already so intense that I hope they all go down. The enablers, the lunatics, and their enablers.
Yes.
I want them. If you stop, how amazing is it that these people who consider themselves conservatives actively worked for decades and decades and decades to take down all of the authoritative institutions of this country? Mm-hmm. That's conservative? I thought they loved authority.
Now, see, this is why Andrew Sullivan isn't voting with those people anymore, is because, Andrew Sullivan was one of the earliest people who actually identified. And he has this wonderful book, and I can't even remember the name of it now, the Conservative Soul or something like that. Yeah. Where you identified it's a kind of a $20 word, a revanchist strain within conservatism. And it's basically, it isn't about being conservative or progressive. It's
quite the opposite.
It's about, in many ways, revenge.
It's okay. So there's always these negatives. It's fear. It's rage. It's revenge. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you can see it in their eyes.
Well, you can see it in the way they relate to Barack Obama.
Yes, and
all that needs to happen is for Barack Obama to suggest that we do something, and they'll be about 20%. They don't care what it is.
No,
they'll go to the mat to stop it.
Right? They'll absolutely go. Okay. Woo! We got to take a break.
Yes.
I am so late. Jared Day is our guest. He is the historian who puts together that amazing Daylee News Nuggets. Google it, subscribe to it. Doesn't cost you a penny, and you get really rich information. Amazing stuff. Daylee. Spell it wrong. News Nuggets. We'll be right back.
Stick around for more with Lynn Cullen live after this.
Go to the allnewbergbargains.com for great deals on gift cards from your favorite local restaurants, bars, museums, attractions, and shows. Log on now for great deals from Best of Pittsburgh 2013 winners and the Pittsburgh Symphony. Plus, sign up for the weekly email for your chance to win $100 in services from the Swickley Spa. The allnewbergbargains.com, Pittsburgh's best bargains, bergbargains.com.
This is Les Ludwig, an independent candidate for mayor of the city of Pittsburgh. I ask for your vote on November 5th, and here's why. Some candidates play politics. I stand for a secure position in regards to fracking, one that's based on my background as a food technologist and opportunities that were presented in my lifetime in the dairy industry when I was a food chemist for the United States Army in Washington, D.C., and the dairy products literally stunk. Someone had to go ahead and take a stand. I did the chemistry, and I stood tall. What are we doing here with fracking? We have a fight between money and public safety. No one has defined clearly where the danger level is in the distance from the wells. Until we take the moratorium for 3 years and find out what that answer is, I have to stand on the side of public health, not on the side of $500 million of money. It's a mistake, because when we poison our water, we literally sentence ourselves to big trouble. I ask you for your vote and the question of standing tall when it comes to making a decision about fracking. Let's keep Allegheny County and its citizens safe. I thank you.
Have a question or an opinion? Call Lynn Cullen at 412-316-3381 or email lynn@pghcitypaper.com. Now, more with Lynn Cullen Live.
Okay, we're back with Jared Day from CMU, but also from the Forum for Economic Development. You're doing research for, this is a nonprofit?
Yeah, in Pittsburgh.
And with whose mission is?
Its broad mission is to revitalize the city of Pittsburgh economically, and it does so by focusing specifically on three groups of people. One being the undereducated people, minorities, and people who get laid off in their 50s and 60s. That really,
these are all people wandering in the desert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that if you look at Pittsburgh has survived this recession remarkably well. If you go to other cities and see how it's going, but
parts of Pittsburgh have.
That's exactly right. But these groups have been largely left out of the recovery.
And I can't remember where I read it the other day, but the African American community here is like one of the poorest African American communities. We've got a real problem.
Yes.
Here. And we need to focus on our African American neighborhoods and neighbors.
Absolutely.
And so that's part of what
that's part of what this organization is about. We're beginning a conversation for bringing some programs to Pittsburgh. There is a program in Cincinnati called Cincinnati Works, which based on our research and the people that we've talked to, it has had a remarkably successful program, a success rate so far, and we're looking at bringing it here in the near future to really get people the resources that they need to make it in the kind of economy that's emerging here. Yeah. Because, there's been so much money and so much attention given to either eds and meds, the kind of educational institutions, and medical, the healthcare industry, and the fracking. That's for a lot of people. What else do you need to do? Well, those three things aren't going to impact most of these groups.
Right.
It kind of leaves them out.
Again.
Yes.
Again and again and again. We have a question from Ray. He says he's a alum of CMU, and he said he thought when he went, and Ray's no spring chicken, I suppose, the whole campus was very conservative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he wants to know if it still is. I don't think of CMU as conservative.
Well, most Republicans and conservatives don't consider it that now anymore.
Well,
certainly.
How would you characterize that?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to look back to what Ray says, is that if you go back, say, before World War II, and I'm not suggesting that Ray goes back that far as an alum, I don't know, but most colleges and universities in this country were quite conservative, like Harvard, Yale, University of Pennsylvania, places like that. Those were bastions of conservatism. And what has happened is since World War II, many universities have kind of moved to the left, okay? And for CMU, it's become in many ways a very compartmentalized polarization where you have the school, the CMU has one of the cutting-edge drama programs in the country.
Yes, all those lunatics over in the theater department.
And then you have in the music department.
Right.
And then, of course, you have the
robotic stuff.
Well, then you have civil engineering and the physics and those programs, and where I would say that those departments lean old-time conservative.
Huh.
Okay. The kind of Eisenhower, Rockefeller, Gerald Ford kind of conservative. Okay. But one of the problems that you see in a place like CMU is that the Republican Party itself has become very anti-science. And such that I was reading some article recently, and I remember posting it, that the vast majority of scientists now vote Democratic.
Well, sure.
But it's like, my uncle is a nuclear physicist, somebody who cut in if you talk about foreign policy, he's kind of like Dick Cheney, and yet he votes consistently Democratic
because he thinks the Republicans are nuts.
He thinks that they are so hostile to any sort of genuine inquiry into science that he feels completely unwelcomed there.
Uh-huh.
And I think that view, both at CMU and at Pitt and places like that where you actually have an intellectual, where you have genuine intellectual inquiry going on.
You said you were an unabashed fan of Barack Obama.
Yes, I am.
Okay, your voice tells me something there.
Yeah.
Why, now, and perception being an important thing, does he seem to be a bystander in his own administration? I mean, why do we keep hearing the president didn't know anything about that?
Right.
The president didn't know anything about that. The president didn't, and he maybe didn't. But then, so who's in his administration that's screwing up? What's going on? Is he a good administrator?
Well, two folks, Thomas Mann and Norm Ornstein, who I believe are at the American Enterprise Institute, a normally fairly conservative outfit.
Yes.
But these two guys I view as the gold standard on, their long, perceptive view of what's going on in Congress and in the government. And they had an article, I believe it was last week, where they talked about how Obama, it was actually Norm Ornstein alone this time, that he's not a good administrator. And this, one of the, and I found that somewhat persuasive. For me as a historian, one of the things I also realize is that when we are viewing, say, Obama's administration, that through the media we only have a sense of about 25% of what's actually going on at any given point in time.
Do we? And we don't find out the other 75%
until much later. And so where I find this most relevant in this conversation is when you talk about the Eisenhower administration. An administration that when it was over in 1960, 61, right in there, he was viewed as an aloof figure, kind of a grandfatherly figure, a nice man, a very popular man, but not somebody who, boy, were they ready for a change at that moment in time. And yet, in retrospectively, since historians have had a chance to really dig into both memoirs and the papers of the president, one of the things you see is that he had actually created, in many ways, a false face for the public. That he played the role of a befuddled
general who found himself in the White House.
Yes, and then he didn't know what was going on. It's like it was an act. And that
to what end?
That it allowed him to. Well, first of all, he as a president, since he'd had this amazing career before he became president, he never felt the need that he had something to prove once he got in there, and it became a useful way for him to deflect whatever might be coming at him, that he'd actually be able to do what he thought he needed to do, rather than to worry about salvaging his reputation. A story that I can tell you about that I love about Dwight Eisenhower is that when there was this dicey issue, I believe it involved some foreign policy issue that was kind of vexing, and his press secretary was like, well, you will be asked about this today at the press conference, and what do it's like, it could go like this and like that, and you really don't want to disclose this and that. And his response was, well, don't worry about it, I'll just confuse them. Deliberate. It was, and here again, the other piece to it is that when you read his papers, he was clearly
crazy like a fox,
on top of everything that was going on. It was actually, if you may remember, Dwight Eisenhower, he had a lot of health problems during his term.
Heart issues and
stroke, heart. Between, I think it was 1965 and 1955 and 1969, he had 8 heart attacks.
Wow.
Okay. And part of it was that, the stress of keeping this public face, masking somebody who's a hard-driving, on top of things executive behind the scenes. And my feeling is that, my sense is that in many ways when we look at Barack Obama, we're looking at somebody who in many ways combines the strengths and weaknesses of Truman and Eisenhower. In the sense of Truman didn't have a lot of experience coming in.
No.
And he was a bad administrator.
Okay.
And Eisenhower was somebody who had this kind of confidence in his own decision making,
but not a lot not a love of politics,
and didn't really care, that he might show up a certain way.
And you think Obama sort of feels that same way?
Some of that,
because he's got a big ego.
Well, he's confident.
Sure of himself.
He's pretty sure of himself.
Yeah, he seems to be just extraordinarily sure of himself.
And he doesn't have a lot of space for kind of give and take of politics.
No, he clearly doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't like it. Okay, a quick email, then I got to get another break in here. This is from Ansel. There was a brilliant editorial in PG recently by Stephen Altschler titled, "I'm Now an Independent." It was subtitled, "Today's GOP Doesn't Want Me, and I Don't Want to Be a Democrat."
I saw that one.
This article so closely relates to your discussion today. To borrow from the article, he says, "Last year when I relocated to Pittsburgh and enrolled to vote, I stared at the form for a long time. I just couldn't check the Republican box. To paraphrase Groucho Marx, I no longer wanted to belong to a club that didn't want me as a member. I couldn't check the Democratic box either." And a couple of, he thinks, good quotes from the thing. "How can any political party grow and prosper in a culture of intolerance when it considers any disagreement on any issue to be blasphemy? The principles that have guided me my entire life are apparently no longer enough. I can believe in small government, low taxes, and strong defense, but unless I share some narrow views on other issues, I fail a litmus test and am not considered a real Republican." They're losing so many of these people.
Absolutely. And, when you look at the kind of divisions that are cutting across the Republican Party right now, it leaves such critical demographics being alienated from the Republicans for the future. I mean, we've talked about sort of this issue of kind of the culture within the party right now, and these, the Tea Party versus, but really the thing that's driving the Republican Party off the cliff is demographics.
And their refusal to deal with, again, reality.
Well, yes.
What is it? They can see the demographics.
Sure.
Their reaction is to still keep kicking the very people that they need.
Sand in the face.
They're out of their... You know what? They're out of.
But here's again, it's that issue that they are deeply wedded to that mythic past where. Well,
then they're going to be, myths. They're going to go the way of the myth. They will be, like a mythical animal. It doesn't exist, really.
Yep. Meltdown. That's it. And it's my own view. And here again, as I mentioned early in the show, this is not. If you were betting your house money on this, you wouldn't be betting on this. But, this is how I think it's going to go.
Yeah.
This is going to be a historic collapse
I think so
of a
too.
party.
I'm with you, of course. I sit at your feet.
Oh, okay.
All right, we got to take a break. I want to talk about Eisenhower's, the guy who came after him when we come back.
JFK?
Yes, absolutely. I've got some questions about that from your historian point of view. We'll be back.
Great.
More is on the way with Lynn Cullen Live.
Come to Little's for all of your back-to-school needs. Little's has everything for all ages to stay in style for this upcoming school season. Check out the large selection from Doc Marten, Steve Madden, UGG, Clarks, Lely Kelly, New Balance, and much, much more. Don't forget to come visit this season's colorful handbag selection as well. Little Shoes, Pittsburgh's largest family shoe store, 5850 Forbes Avenue in Squirrel Hill.
Download the CP Haps app to find out what's happening in Pittsburgh. It's the fun and free app that puts the most popular events at your fingertips. Text events to 77948 to download now. Available on the App Store and Google Play. Brought to you by Pittsburgh City Paper.
You're listening to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Once again, here's Lynn Cullen.
And speaking of speaking of mythology, because I want to talk about JFK a little bit here, because there is a mythology that has taken over for history when it comes to JFK. And the New York Times had a very interesting piece by Jill Abramson, which I'm sorry you didn't read, but I'll give you a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. And she says the whole thing that he died as a martyr at a young age and blah, 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 blah. That, and then the mythology in Camelot kicked in, that has obscured so much about who he was, what his presidency was, what happened. You have other lauded presidential historians like Robert Caro, who's still working on Lyndon Johnson.
We're hoping he makes it.
I hope so, too. That's really quite something. Saying that there is no great book about Kennedy.
Yes.
And then they go into the fact that part of that is the mythology. Part of that is that the Kennedy family and its and Schlesinger and Sorensen and that whole crowd.
Townsend's, yeah.
They made a point of creating this myth, and anyone who attempts to break into it or go against it, if you're a historian, you get nothing. You get no access to anybody or anything. And so it's going to have to take like 100 years. And they, in fact, have impounded till 2067, excuse me, a lot of the stuff that you as a historian would want to get at to assess his presidency.
It's actually been one of the lesser known, I would say, most kind of history destroying aspects that have occurred. It happened actually under the George W. Bush administration, was that they retroactively withdrew hundreds of thousands of documents from the Bush Sr., the Clinton administration, W's administration, and basically put them under a similar kind of executive order that closes them off to historians.
Wait. So W. Bush did that, but how could he do that? I can see where he could do it for his papers. How does he get away doing it for Clinton's? He said he had Clinton papers,
and his father's papers.
And he just took them, put them in a lockbox.
Well,
that you can't get at until like we're all dead.
Yeah, exactly. And which is to say that that they're not open to the public, and there's been historians who are fighting that, but this got written into, and I could be wrong on this. I think it was written into some of the Patriot Act, the subsequent legislation with the Patriot Act. I don't know if you remember the CNN documentary on the Cold War from like 1995, 94, around in there. It was just one of the best. It was like 28 episodes on CNN on the history of the Cold War. That whole series ended up being withdrawn from circulation because it turns out that there was some classified things. Are
you kidding me?
No. Now it's back out now, just within the last year on DVD for the first time. For a number of years there under the Bush administration, they had been withdrawn simply because some of the scenes they'd used in that documentary were reclassified as closed to the public.
Wow.
So.
Wow.
That now.
That's the kind of thing I used to think, speaking of the Cold War, happened in the Soviet Union, where they would rewrite history and distort history. Yeah. But no. It happens here too.
So this thing about the JFK papers and their sources, that doesn't surprise me.
There's it says that. They enlist other historians to like put the screws to people who might be going in the wrong places, and names that you respect. The Bush people
do the same thing.
Names that you respect, like Doris Kearns Goodwin, doing the job for the Kennedys, and Arthur Schlesinger, and all of that, and just blackballing anyone who dares to try to the books, there's been a gazillion books written about Kennedy, and they fall into this either, the mythic and hagiography kind of stuff, or the
hypercritical.
He was an idiot. He was a this. He was a
communist.
He was a commie. He was a this. He was a whatever. he was, and we don't get in this. Listen to this for writing though. They say that in Esquire magazine commissioned Norman Mailer in 1960 to go to. This is the first time Mailer did anything political.
Yes.
Commissioned him to go to the Democratic National Convention and do a piece. And that piece ended up being titled "Superman Comes to the Supermarket." And according to Jill Abramson, that essay came as close as any to capturing Kennedy's essence. Let me read some of Mailer's lines. They're so wow. Here's Mailer. Here was a 43. Oh no, this is not Mailer. This is Abramson. Here is a 43-year-old man whose irony and grace were keyed to the national temper in 1960. Kennedy's presence, youthful and light, was at once soothing and disruptive, with a touch of brusqueness. And here's Mailer. He carried himself with a cool grace, which seemed indifferent to applause. His manner somehow similar to the poise of a fine boxer, quick with his hands, neat in his timing, and 2 feet away from his corner when the bell ended the round. And then Mailer says, however, there was an elusive detachment to everything he did. One did not have the feeling of a man present in the room with all his weight and all his mind. And Mailer goes on to say, and he didn't know whether to value that elusiveness that Kennedy had or to be aware of it. Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting, I think that same thing could be written about Barack Obama.
Yeah, and FDR.
And FDR.
Oh, yeah. These are people who were very and are very effective at compartmentalizing almost all areas of their life.
Well, that's what we used to hear about Clinton, so that he could screw everything, walking.
Exactly.
And still be a great president.
Yeah. And it's
but how does Obama? Yeah.
I would say now here again, realizing that we only have about 25% of the picture of Barack Obama at this point. We have some more with Clinton, much more with Kennedy and FDR, but it's like I think it is almost something that is required to do the job. Is to have the capacity to turn on a dime from talking, say, about school desegregation to how to pass a piece of legislation in Congress, to figure out who you're going to go to dinner with tonight. One of the most interesting things I found out about Barack Obama, and this is sort of relates to this, I think, is there's this whole phenomenon they've identified out there called decision fatigue. Have you heard about this?
No, but I can.
It's basically
kick in.
It's basically that the more decisions you have to make over the course of a day, the quality of your decision making declines over the course of the day. I confronted this myself recently when I had to move, and by the end of the day, I was just completely brain dead. Such that I couldn't decide about anything that was whether to take it or leave it. And for Obama, one of the things he's read about this, and one of the things he says is, don't bother me with routine stuff like what do you want for dinner. Don't bother me with stuff like that. Don't bother me with stuff that is just like run-of-the-mill stuff, because
I have to deal with the big. Well, somebody suggested that, to be the president means that every question and decision that gets to you is the decision that couldn't be made by anybody, that whole big apparatus, because it's a problem.
It's a serious problem.
Because it's a big problem, and because there's no sure, obvious answer. So all he gets is the
big ones, or he gets ones like this whole thing with the NSA spying on foreign leaders business, where it gets carried over from the previous administration. And now this is one possible interpretation, is that people in the NSA said there's no need to revisit this with the president.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't.
He doesn't have to know this, so
Yeah, and you can see this with previous administrations, such as Nixon and Vietnam under LBJ. That you have.
So sometimes when the president actually says, "I didn't know," it's true.
It's possible.
It's possible.
It's quite possible
that he didn't know, because after all, how can he know everything?
Sure, and some people were masters at exploiting that kind of dynamic, J. Edgar Hoover being one of them. Somebody who took previous decisions made, especially by FDR, that broadened the FBI's authority, and then, later presidents never thought to ask what was actually going on under certain circumstances, or would expand authority when they didn't really understand what had already happened before. in areas like wiretapping and that sort of thing.
I want to, just because we're almost out of time, I want to get into the international sphere a bit, which I really treasure your Daylee News Nuggets for keeping me a little more tuned in, because as an American, I don't really give a damn about anything that ain't happening right here. and your take on China to me has been fascinating. Why are you? You don't think China's going to eat our shorts?
Well, here's my view of it: that the conversation that China's going to eat our shorts is a dangerous conversation for Americans to take too seriously.
Okay.
Because what happens is that conservatives and many other, the neoconservative, the hawks out there will use that conversation to have us fill missile gaps that don't exist, that will have us spend billions that we don't have, that will kind of create a demon where there isn't one. And the more you look at China, there's reason to be concerned, but it's so not in the way that most people seem to think of it.
Okay, so there's no doubt that China is going to be
an economic behemoth
and will dwarf us.
Yeah.
But you're saying that doesn't make them king of the world, and we need to,
especially when
suck it up and deal with it.
Yeah, I know we're almost out of time, but it's the kind of thing that when you look at their military, and this is an area that I've showcased quite a bit on my blog. Yeah. It's so pathetic, and you look at their people talk about. I mean, America has 11 aircraft carrier supercarrier battle groups. 11.
Didn't they just come up with their own little? They had a christening for their first. What was it?
It was their first supercarrier. This was about 2 years ago. It was a model that they had they bought from the Soviet Union back in 1984. They dragged the thing because it didn't have an engine. They dragged it to China. Okay, and they've spent the last 20 years refitting this thing such that it now functions, and yet you would think that the United States has something to fear from this.
When it's a joke. I mean, it's a joke.
It's a joke.
But they could, with all their economic might, and all those people, they could gear up and.
In 30 or 40 years, maybe. But it would take... People don't appreciate... The United States has been in the global Navy business since the 1880s.
Yeah.
And when you have that depth of officer training, when you have that depth of familiarity, you also need to have a global infrastructure where you can send your ships around the world, and they'll have places where they can get refueled and ports of call. Right now, China doesn't have that. There's parts of the world,
and they're going through a real. I mean, getting away from their military, they're really struggling their government to know how to be
what they're up to.
They don't know.
Yes.
And their people are getting a little restive, I think.
Yes, I think so. And it's basically half the country is doing remarkably well, and the other half might as well be in Africa.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, what an interesting world. And speaking of Africa, that's another thing.
Yes.
Good heavens. Well, geez, I enjoyed this immensely. I hope we can have you back sometime.
We'll have to see if we can't do that. Okay. I would love to.
Okay. Jared Day, Daylee, Daylee News Nuggets. It comes right into your little email box, and there it is. And we didn't even say, with the most glorious photographs you've ever seen. God, I look forward so much to what you're going to do. And you once told me you only do it with a certain number of pixels so that it's absolutely...
Most of the pictures you get online they don't have the right dots per inch. So that it really does limit the number that is available to me.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Hope you enjoyed the show. I'm sure you did. And tomorrow, Thomas Sokolowski.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.